Hello everyone, my name is Yakir and today we are going to talk about methods in Java. A method is a more efficient way to contain code that has a specific purpose. For example, a method to calculate an area of a square, or count even or odd numbers in a list, or to check how many vowels in a word. The possibilities are endless. In our most recent tutorial about classes and variables, we were asked to reverse a number, and we did it all in our main method. It worked, although we saw that there are great disadvantage in doing so. In case we needed to reverse a number again or multiple times, we would just need to write it over and over again, and that could become very tedious and awkward to write. So instead, we actually need a way to write a single command, and with that single command to do the same thing, to reverse a number every time we need. So for doing so, we need something called a method. We need to write a method that does exactly what we need it to do and return us the result. And every time we want to perform that method, we will just call it. Okay, so a method has a specific syntax. Let's see how it assembled. First, there is the permission. We need to mention if you want it to be public, private, or protected, or without any permission at all. So in most cases, what we do is we mention it to be public. So the whole purpose is to let other people use what we wrote in the method, in case we are working with other people or for ourselves. If we are working in other files, for example, other class files. Okay, so the second thing, we could mention it to be static if you want. I'm not gonna go over why we need a method to be static. Basically, every method that it is static could be also regular method. But we will go over that in the future and it will be very clear. It's not that complicated. The next thing we need is to write the return type. For example, an int, double, string, boolean, void, etc. So return type will be returned to us when the method exits. You can say, okay, so we need the method to do something, some calculation, and when it's done with the calculation, it should actually save the changes and return us back what it found. For example, if you want to calculate an area of a rectangle, we will take two numbers, multiply between them, and return that result. And that result, it could be a double number, which is a number that has a decimal point, for example 23.4, or an int number like 23. This will basically help us get data back when our method is finished running. For our reverse method, we could specify that we want it to return us the reverse number after it exits. Okay, so and also if we write the return type to be a string, for example, we will need to mention that we need to return a word when we finish with our method. Double for something with a decimal point. A boolean will return us true or false, in case we need to know that, and so on. We have another special return type I would like to talk about briefly, and that is void. Void doesn't return anything actually, and is used usually in case you are working with changing variables that are outside of the method scope. But for now, we are not gonna focus in void for simplicity's sake. Okay, so the next thing we write is the name of the method. You can call it whatever you want. And lastly, parentheses, which can be used to receive an input in our method. An input from outside source or from a keyboard if you ask from a user to type something, or just use a method from a different method. Okay, you don't have to pass it an input if you don't want it to, if you don't want to, but you must mention these parentheses in the syntax. So they could be also empty, but you have to mention them. So now we open curly braces, which within we write our code. Between the opening curly braces and the closing curly braces, our reverse method will get a number of an int type, so we write it here. Reverse it and return the reversed number back. So let's write it. Actually, the name here inside the input, inside those parentheses, doesn't really matter. I mean, you can call the variable name, the input variable name, whatever you like. So, for example, you could pass on later to the method variable name x, but inside the method the variable name could be z, for example. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it will be called z only in the scope of the method. So when you get out of the method, this z variable will disappear. So let's write the content of the method now, as we did in the tutorial before, and save our result in an int variable named result. Now, since we return an int, as you can see here, we can return the result. It's a whole number, and that's okay. So if we take a number like 1, 2, 3, we'll return 3 to 1. It's a whole number, so that will be okay. After the method will finished, we will have this number. Okay, so as we mentioned before about the variables that are inside, the variables that we put in the input, it will be available only within the method itself. And so a variable lifespan is actually within the brackets that are in charge of it. So for example, if it's in the brackets of the method, it will live as long as the method exists, but when the method exits, it will disappear. There are also things. This is called a local variable. A local variable only for a certain method. Okay, it only lives inside the method. Once it exits, it disappears. But there are also things called global variables, which lives in the scope of the whole class. As you can see here, I'll define a global variable. So its parameters will be the opening of the class with the curly brackets and braces, and the closing of the class. So which means that it will stay available as long as the class is running. And the structure of a class is basically you have the class definition, and within the class you have different methods. So which means that all the methods are inside the class, and they can use these variables as long as they want. They can change the variables, the global variables, as long as they want. Our approach is not to use global variables. Okay, our approach is to get data in the method, change that data, and return a new data. Return a number or a string, but not to make any changes to the original data type. So in this case, we will get a number, for example, 1, 2, 3, but we're not gonna change that number itself. We are going to return a new number, and for the idea is that you don't that you get like a number, and let's say imagine that you have to do a few changes on the number or a few calculations, and you don't want to change the original. For example, you want to know what is the sum of the number. So 1 to 3 will yield 6, and you want after that you want to return to get to show the reverse number, what it will be like, and after that you want to check how many digits are odd or even. So for these cases, these ideas, you don't need to change the original unless you've been asked to, and this is also possible. A void type actually deals with those cases that you want to change something permanent and you don't care about the return type because you're already changing a global variable. So, but this is very confusing to deal with. Now we will come across void data types as we go along, I believe. Okay, so for now we returned the result number, and now let's test it out. Let's build a main method, which for that we need to create a separate file. We don't have to create a separate file. We could have it in the same class files that we just built, but for practice sake and to see the public keyword comes into implementation, we will build actually another class, put the main method inside it, and call our reverse method and supply it a number we choose. So notice that our reverse method works with numbers that are 3 digits long. So we'll give it a 3 digits number. Now, this is how you call a method. You mention the name, you mention the parentheses. If they're empty, you don't write anything in them, but if they receive anything, you write what you want to pass along to them. So for example, when we declared the method, the reverse method, we said that we want to receive a whole number, an integer number. So now we need to give it, from the call side of things, we need to give it a whole number too. So we can just directly write a number here, for example 1, 2, 3, as we used to. Or alternatively, we could just type a variable here. Let's say we saved our 1, 2, 3 number in a variable named x, and then we can just write x, and this is the translation of that number. X is actually 1, 2, 3, so that's okay. And it's an int type, so it will accept it. So now you need to notice that when this call ends, actually after this command, after this line here, this call will end. And when it ends, it will bring us back the result, which is a number. So this whole line here will be translated into a whole number, an integer number. So we need to do something with it. If we just leave it like that, it's gonna do its thing, right? But we're not gonna see it on the screen. We're not gonna be saving it into a variable or anything else. We're not gonna do anything else with it. So for now, for test reasons, for testing purposes, we will just print it on the screen and see if we got the designated result. Let's see. Okay, great. So it worked. So now we can just write multiple times with no problem the numbers that we wish to reverse, and it will do the job for us. Now, so it works, but we need to make it even better. We will need to handle cases, base cases, like for example, what happens if someone enters a negative number, or what happens if someone enters a number bigger than 3 digits. It has more than 3 digits. We need a method not to crash, but actually return an error saying, okay, that's, you need to provide a 3 digits number, not more or not less. So we will see how we do that in our next tutorial. And also eventually what we will do with this method is we will make it handle any numbers that we want eventually. So stay tuned. I'm here, and with any question or comment, please feel free to leave it down below. I would appreciate also if you subscribe or leave me a thumbs up. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.